Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling something pretty fundamental,
Oh, yeah.
life itself.
Okay.
We've got excerpts from a biology textbook focusing on taxonomy.
Right.
That's the science of classifying organisms. And the just mind-boggling diversity of life on Earth.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. We walk around every day surrounded by plants and animals, even microscopic life.
Right.
But how often do we stop and really consider
Yeah.
how we even know what's what?
That's a good point. And that's really where taxonomy comes in.
Okay.
It's not just about these dry lists and Latin names.
Right.
It's a framework for understanding the very essence of life and its origins and how everything is connected.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So before we jump into classifying everything,
Yeah.
maybe we should start with the basics.
Yeah.
How do we even define life?
Sure.
What makes something living in the first place?
Well, you'd think it would be an easy question, right?
Yeah.
But defining life is surprisingly complex. It's actually something that scientists and philosophers have grappled with for centuries.
I can see how that could get tricky.
Yeah.
I mean, on the surface it seems obvious, but where did you draw the line?
Exactly. Early humans observed the natural world with a sense of awe and sometimes fear.
Yeah.
They even personified elements like fire, wind, and the sea,
Oh, wow.
imbuing them with lifelike qualities.
Interesting.
But from a scientific standpoint, we need a more concrete set of criteria.
So what criteria do biologists use today
Okay.
to distinguish a living organism from, say, a rock or a river?
There are several key characteristics that, taken together, point to something being alive.
Okay.
One of the most fundamental is the ability to grow and reproduce.
Okay.
Living organisms can create copies of themselves, passing their traits down to future generations.
Right.
And the methods of reproduction are incredibly diverse.
Yeah.
Think about the simple division of bacteria compared to the complex mating rituals of some birds.
That's a huge range. It makes you wonder how those processes even evolved in the first place.
Absolutely. And that's a whole other deep dive waiting to happen.
Right.
But back to our criteria for life.
Okay.
Another big one is metabolism.
Okay.
This refers to the ability to take in nutrients from the environment,
Right.
convert them into energy, and expel waste.
So it's like this constant cycle of building and breaking down.
Yes.
All fueled by the energy obtained from food.
Exactly.
Plants get their energy from sunlight, of course.
Precisely. This
Yeah.
flow of energy and matter is essential for growth repair
Yes.
and responding to changes in the environment.
Okay.
And that brings us to another hallmark of life: adaptation and evolution.
So living things aren't static.
Right.
They change over time in response to their surroundings.
Exactly. Individuals with traits that give them an advantage in a particular environment are more likely to survive and reproduce.
Okay.
Over generations, these advantageous traits become more common, leading to the evolution of new species. Think of Darwin's finches.
Oh, yeah.
Their beak shapes evolved based on the types of food available on different islands.
Right. It's almost like nature is running a giant experiment, constantly testing and refining different forms of life.
That's a great way to put it. And this brings us to the sheer scale of biodiversity on Earth.
Okay.
Scientists estimate there are somewhere between 1.7 and 1.8 million known species.
Wow.
And new ones are being discovered all the time.
That's mind-boggling. But with so many life forms out there,
Yeah.
how do we even begin to make sense of it all?
Right.
That's where taxonomy comes in.
You got it. Early human societies developed their own ways of classifying organisms,
Right.
often based on practical uses like which plants were edible or which animals were dangerous.
Right. So like a functional taxonomy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But as our knowledge expanded, the need for a more standardized and universal system became clear.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Imagine the confusion if scientists in different parts of the world were using completely different names and categories for the same organisms.
Exactly. And that's where the brilliance of Carl Linnaeus and his binomial nomenclature system comes in.
Okay.
He provided a universal two-part name for every organism.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
It's like a scientific first and last name for every species.
Precisely. Let's take the mango as an example.
Okay.
Its scientific name is Mangifera indica.
Okay.
Mangifera is the genus, a broader grouping,
Right.
and indica is the specific epithet which narrows it down to that particular type of mango.
So no matter where you are in the world, if you say Mangifera indica, everyone knows you're talking about the same delicious fruit.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool for clear communication in the scientific community.
Yeah.
But binomial nomenclature is just one part of the larger system of taxonomy.
Okay.
We also have the taxonomic hierarchy, which organizes organisms into increasingly broad categories based on shared characteristics.
Okay, I think I remember learning about this in school.
Yeah.
It's like a filing system for life.
Right. SAC.
You have kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species.
Yes.
Each level containing groups that are more and more closely related.
You've got it. It's a brilliant system that helps us trace the evolutionary relationships between all living things.
So if we use humans as an example,
Okay.
our species is Homo sapiens.
Right.
We belong to the genus Homo, the family Hominidae, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And as we move up the hierarchy, we share fewer and fewer traits with the other organisms in those broader categories.
Exactly. We're more closely related to other primates in the order primates than we are to, say, insects in the phylum Arthropoda.
Right.
It's a beautiful way to visualize the interconnectedness of life.
This is all fascinating.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, I'm already feeling a bit overwhelmed by the sheer number of categories and terms.
I hear you.
Yeah.
It can definitely be a lot to take in.
Right.
But that's what we're here for, to break it down and make it digestible.
In that case, I'm ready to dive into the next level of detail. What are some of the challenges scientists face in classifying organisms?
Okay.
And how does this whole system account for new discoveries and changes in our understanding of evolution?
Those are great questions. And they get to the heart of why taxonomy is such a dynamic and ever-evolving field.
Okay, I'm all ears.
All right. Welcome back to our deep dive into the living world. We've laid the groundwork, defining life and touching on the basics of taxonomy.
Right.
Now let's tackle some of those challenges you mentioned.
Okay, so where do we start?
Yeah.
You mentioned that the taxonomic hierarchy can get a bit messy.
Yeah.
Especially at the higher levels, like kingdoms.
Yeah, think about those big overarching categories like kingdoms.
Right.
Traditionally, we had a simple two-kingdom system. Plants and animals.
Right.
Pretty straightforward, right?
Seems logical everything fits into one or the other.
Well, as our scientific tools became more sophisticated, we started peering into the microscopic world and discovered a whole bunch of organisms that didn't fit neatly into either category. Fungi, for example, aren't plants.
Right.
They don't photosynthesize. And then there are single-celled organisms like bacteria. They have their own unique characteristics.
So the old two-kingdom system started to crumble.
It became clear that we needed a more nuanced approach.
Okay.
Over time, different systems emerged with varying numbers of kingdoms.
Right.
A common one today uses 5 kingdoms.
Okay.
Plantae, Animalia, Fungi, Protista, and Monera.
5 kingdoms.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I can handle that.
Okay.
But what distinguishes each one?
Sure.
Give me the rundown.
Let's start with the familiar.
Okay.
Plantae is pretty straightforward.
Right.
Multicellular photosynthetic organisms.
Right.
Think trees, flowers, ferns, and mosses. They're the basis of most terrestrial ecosystems.
And Animalia is all the critters running, swimming, flying, and crawling around.
Yeah.
The ones that eat other organisms for energy.
You got it. Now, fungi, they're also multicellular, but they get their nutrients in a different way.
Okay.
They absorb organic matter from their surroundings.
Okay.
Think mushrooms sprouting on a decaying log.
They're nature's decomposers.
Yeah.
Essential but often overlooked.
Right.
What about the other two? Protista and Monera.
Those are the ones that really shook things up.
Okay.
Protista is a bit of a grab bag kingdom.
Okay.
It mostly contains single-celled eukaryotic organisms.
Okay, hold on. Remind me what eukaryotic means again?
Oh, yeah.
It's been a while since high school biology.
No worries. It's easy to forget.
Yeah.
Basically, eukaryotic cells have a defined nucleus where their DNA is stored.
Right.
Think of it like the cell's control center.
Yeah.
Plants, animals, and fungi are all made up of eukaryotic cells.
Okay, got it.
So Protista includes a bunch of single-celled eukaryotes.
Right.
What kind of organisms are we talking about?
Yeah, like what falls into that category?
It's a pretty diverse bunch.
Okay.
Amoebas, algae, slime molds.
Well.
They all fall under Protista. They might not be as glamorous as a lion or a redwood tree.
Right.
But they play crucial roles in their ecosystems.
I'm starting to realize just how much we owe to these microscopic life forms.
Absolutely. Now, Monera is the kingdom for all the prokaryotic organisms.
Okay.
Mostly bacteria and archaea.
Right.
Their cells lack a defined nucleus, so their DNA is just kind of floating around inside.
So bacteria are prokaryotic, while everything else we've talked about is eukaryotic.
Exactly. And prokaryotes are some of the oldest and most adaptable life forms on Earth. But everywhere.
Yeah.
They can survive in extreme environments like hot springs and deep-sea vents.
It's amazing how life finds a way to thrive in even the harshest conditions.
It really is.
Yeah.
And as we discover more about these microbial communities, our understanding of the tree of life continues to evolve.
Speaking of the tree of life, we've talked about kingdoms.
Right.
But how do scientists decide what belongs where within those broader categories?
Yeah.
How do they determine the relationships between all these different life forms?
Well, remember that taxonomic hierarchy, kingdom, phylum, class, and so on?
Yeah.
Scientists look for shared characteristics to determine how organisms are grouped.
So the more traits two species share, the more closely related they are.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But what kind of characteristics are we talking about?
It depends on the organisms.
Okay.
Scientists use a combination of morphological traits.
Okay.
That's their physical form and structure.
Right.
And molecular data, like DNA sequences.
Okay.
The idea is to find similarities that point to a common ancestor.
So for animals, they might look at things like skeletal structure, body symmetry, or the presence of certain organs.
Exactly.
Okay.
And for plants, they might consider things like leaf arrangement, flower structure, or the types of seeds they produce.
Right.
As we get down to the lower levels of the hierarchy, the characteristics become more and more specific.
It's fascinating how all these seemingly disparate life forms can be traced back to common ancestors.
Right.
It really highlights the unity of life on Earth.
It does.
But I can imagine that it gets tricky, especially when new discoveries are made.
It definitely does. There are always debates and disagreements within the scientific community about how organisms should be classified.
Sure.
And as new technologies emerge, like DNA sequencing, we get a clearer picture of evolutionary relationships, which sometimes leads to revisions in the taxonomic hierarchy.
So it's not a static system.
Right.
It's constantly being refined and updated.
Exactly.
Oh.
And that's what keeps taxonomy so interesting.
Yeah.
It's a dynamic field that reflects our ever-growing knowledge of the diversity and interconnectedness of life.
You certainly piqued my curiosity.
Good.
In our next segment, I'd love to delve deeper into some specific examples.
Okay.
And explore how scientists are grappling with these classification challenges.
I'm happy to dive in.
Okay.
We can look at some cases where new discoveries have led to major reclassifications.
Okay.
And explore the ongoing debate surrounding the very definition of a species.
I'm ready when you are. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been on quite a journey exploring the very definition of life and grappling with the complexities of taxonomy.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
I'm ready to get into some specific examples and see how these principles play out in the real world.
I thought you might say that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a concept that's central to taxonomy.
Okay.
The definition of a species.
Okay.
It seems like a simple idea, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually one of the most debated topics in biology.
Really? I mean, I remember learning the basic definition, a group of organisms that can interbreed and produce fertile offspring.
Right.
What's so complicated about that?
Well, that definition works pretty well for many plants and animals.
Yeah.
But it starts to break down when you consider organisms that reproduce asexually.
Okay.
Like bacteria.
Right.
Or what about hybrids? Like mules, which are the offspring of a horse and a donkey. They can't reproduce.
Yeah.
So do they constitute a separate species?
I see your point. It's not as clear-cut as it seems.
Yeah.
Our textbook mentions that the concept of species is constantly being refined as new discoveries are made.
Exactly. And with advances in genetic analysis, we're getting a much more nuanced understanding of the relationships between different groups of organisms.
Okay.
Sometimes what we thought were distinct species turn out to be more closely related than we realized.
Can you give us an example of that?
Sure.
I'd love to hear about a case where new evidence led to a major reclassification.
There's a fascinating example involving a group of birds called flycatchers.
Okay.
There are several species that look very similar and were traditionally classified based on their physical characteristics.
Okay.
But when scientists analyzed their DNA, they discovered that some of these species were actually more closely related to birds in completely different genera.
So the way they looked was misleading. Their outward appearance didn't accurately reflect their evolutionary history.
Exactly. It's a reminder that evolution doesn't always follow a predictable path.
Right.
And it highlights the importance of using multiple lines of evidence, both morphological and molecular, to build a more accurate picture of the tree of life.
This makes taxonomy sound more like detective work than a rigid set of rules.
Yeah.
Scientists are constantly gathering clues and piecing together the puzzle of life's history.
That's a great analogy. And sometimes new discoveries completely overturn our previous assumptions.
Okay, like what?
There's a fascinating group of microscopic organisms called archaea.
Okay.
They were once thought to be a type of bacteria, but their unique genetic and biochemical features revealed that they actually represent a completely separate domain of life.
Wow, a whole new domain.
Yeah.
That's a major shift in our understanding of the tree of life.
It really is. And it shows how taxonomy is constantly evolving as we learn more about the diversity and complexity of the living world.
This deep dive has given me a whole new appreciation for the challenges and rewards of taxonomy.
Good.
It's not just about memorizing names and categories.
Right.
It's about unraveling the intricate tapestry of life and understanding the connections between all living things.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And as we continue to explore the natural world, we're bound to uncover even more surprises and mysteries.
Well, I, for one, am excited to see what the future holds for taxonomy. But before we wrap up, I want to pose a few questions to our listeners. Something to ponder as they go about their day.
I like it. Let's get them thinking.
Okay, so first, think about the biodiversity in your own neighborhood.
Okay.
How many different species of plants and animals can you identify?
That's a good one.
What are their characteristics, and how do they fit into the broader taxonomic hierarchy?
And how might you apply the principles of taxonomy to observe and document the changes in biodiversity over time?
Right.
What clues can you gather about the evolutionary relationships between the organisms you encounter?
These are just a few starting points, but we encourage you to explore further, to ask questions, and to marvel at the incredible diversity and interconnectedness of life on Earth.
Remember, the world is full of wonders waiting to be discovered.
That's it for this deep dive into the living world.
Great deep dive.
We hope you've enjoyed the journey and come away with a deeper appreciation for the science of taxonomy. Until next time, keep those minds curious